were like, wait a minute. He probably felt like a reject. When I look at his figure, okay, I see that he's not the most masculine looking. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. You're rocking with me, Lola, once again. And as always, click like, subscribe, tell a friend, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Amenhotep IV, better known as Akhenaten, and why he is not the founder of monotheism. So stay tuned. Okay, so a lot of you may be familiar with this ruler of ancient Kemet, or what better known as ancient Egypt. And you may know him by his very artistic style of statues, in which he basically looked like himself, and he wanted to be seen for who he was in the flesh, like for real. And that's one of the most striking things we know about him in the modern world. However, one of the other contentions is that he was the founder of monotheism, and how that plays into, I guess, the biblical stories that people attempt to associate with Egypt and or the rulers of Egypt. So I want to just get into a few issues that I take with that position, just because I've done my own research, and I find it striking that there's certain conversations that are not being had that I think would better serve the overall issue of whether or not monotheism is an issue with this ruler or not. So I want to start with his early life and just get into that and how we might kind of can see why he decided to be a tyrant, a religious tyrant, just based on his childhood. Now, from what I know, he was the fourth child of his father, Amenhotep III, and he wasn't the fourth boy, but he was the fourth child, meaning there was probably two girls, or a girl and a boy in between. I'm leaning more towards two girls in between, and the oldest was a boy. So he was a younger child, and he inherited the throne because his father had passed, obviously, and his older brother had passed as well, and obviously his two sisters couldn't be Pharaoh at the time. So it naturally would go to him. However, during that time, when it was time to pass the baton, there was contention as to why the baton should be passed to him in terms of rulership. Now, given he was directly in line in terms of royal lineage to be the ruler, it's interesting that there was problems with that. You know, like the royal house was divided in terms of whether or not he should be the ruler. I read there was certain conversations that were going on in terms of maybe the son of one of his father's concubines would better serve the country in terms of leadership. And that's unprecedented when you have a living royal male right there, son of the pharaoh. Like, you know, in terms of how they culturally set up their political system. And so that was very telling to me that there was a major problem with him as a child, because he didn't inherit this position as an older man. So as a young man, there was issues, and those issues probably more likely stemmed from everything that was known about him from birth. Now, so that's a premise there that, okay, you know, he probably felt like a reject. You see what I'm saying? He probably understood the reasons why people had issues with him being a king. He probably didn't even think that he would be a king in the region because of his older brother, which he's fine with. However, that rejection in terms of who he was still there anytime people are doubting tradition simply because it's him. I know that when I look at his figure, okay, I see that he's not the most masculine looking man. And I do know that Egyptians were highly visual people. Obviously, they led the world in terms of art and things like that. Um, but also, I feel like maybe there may have been some issue with just maybe his cognitive function. And the reason I say that is because sometimes there can be certain slight tics with someone that might have a mental disorder that might not be as extreme as, let's say, Tourette's syndrome or something like that, but he might have been bipolar. Um, and not the extreme of it or like manic depressive, but there may have been some, some small little tick that was okay for him being a royal, but as far as him sitting on the throne, people are like, wait a minute, and so I feel like that's being overlooked because we don't have a whole lot of information about, what people's opinion of him was, only that just him in general, he was wrong to be leading anything, regardless of who he was related to. And that is very striking for a country with thousands of years of tradition to just break away from, as far as that's concerned. And honestly, if he did have some sort of mental issue, that would have been a legitimate concern of anyone. And given that he probably was not out there in terms of the public eye, the only people that would have known about this in an intimate way would have been members of the royal household, like his other wives, his other brothers and sisters, maybe, certain members of council to his father would have known about this. So, this is what I'm getting from it. So as an adult, I can see how that constant rejection can show up in his adulthood in the way that it did. Because if he was being rejected for whatever reason as a child and as a young adult, it probably came with people stating that he was cursed, in that they're inside of their spiritual tradition, he was this way because he was not meant to be a leader, and thus it was meant for someone else. I'm probably someone ignorantly said something like that, like God made him this way, and this way is not the way of the quote unquote gods. Like I could see someone saying something like that to him, and so if people could say that to him, right? And he's not even up for kingship. Once he is up for kingship, if he should get that kingship, I can see him saying, now that I'm calling the shots, guess what's going to happen? I'm demolishing that whole system that you utilized against me. And I'm going to put in what I feel should be in place that services me, that tells me that I am worth my position. And so when I see him worshiping the literal sun in the sky on the premise that it sheds equal light on everyone and it gives life to all things, not just some things, I can see how that can be tied to his childhood. I can see that. Now, the other issue I had is this. His mother fought for him to have that position. Like she fought tooth and nail according to the stories and different things, resources that I've read in terms of, what happened historically. And it came down to politics, a whole lot of politics. So it wasn't easy getting him in there. And I don't think that his mother understood maybe some of the issues that people were seeing, that made it where as though the country felt that it wasn't in the country's best interest for him to be, sit on the throne. Versus for her, she felt that, well, as a woman, I don't want to see my son, who is, has a direct lineage, take a back seat to some other woman's child that isn't in direct lineage over my son. Because I'm going to be honest with you, given what happened, it's like, as a mom, you fought for your son because of who he was related to, not based on his ability to rule. He probably was not bred to rule a nation like his older brother. When meetings were happening, he probably was not in them. for multiple reasons. One being his position, and two, probably his disposition. So I feel like as a mom, that was probably a mistake on her part, just simply because of needing to keep her child in play, or one of her children in play. And there may have been infighting between women, okay? Because if the concubine's son is sitting on the throne, why would he keep his older son, his older brothers, and his older brother's mother still in the royal court? Like, why would he do that? That causes friction just because of what we know about how royals interact with each other in terms of the political infighting. So I think that was a mistake on his mother's part, because of other things, and it had nothing to do with the stability of the country. And this is where we start finding out that, okay, stability is very important for Egypt at this time, because Akhenaten did inherit Egypt at a time when it was at its height. He didn't inherit Egypt at its lowest point. So that's another point. And so I'm just kind of giving you guys the basis of what I feel about his early life and how that could play into who he was as an adult, just in general. But moving forward in terms of his belief system, I'm going to say this. I feel that his whole motivation was to take down the system that he understood as the reason why he was rejected. So no matter what truth was in that system, in terms of the Neteru, that people often call the Egyptian deities or Egyptian gods, no matter what truth may have been inside of that spiritual system, and not that I believe that the Neteru are gods or can be equal to gods, they're forces of nature, I feel that he was simply in a rejection mode, that it didn't matter. And he was trying to prove something to himself first, that he never really proved. Just to be clear, though, because we now know in 2021 that the ancient Egyptians did not see the Neteru as deities in the way that, let's say, Christians may see God or something like that. For Akhenaten to use another force of nature and say, well, this right here, this force of nature that I feel is the only force of nature that there is, it wasn't based on anything. And it's like he's literally changing people's religion as if he's telling them to put on a brand new cloak. And it doesn't work that way. People don't change their belief system because someone else tells them this is what we are believing now. That's not how it works. And you can see how that would cause major problems in their market system, in their currency system, in their trade system. It would cause a whole lot of rift, but he didn't care. And this is one of the aspects of his reign that caught my attention, that he didn't care how it disrupted people's interpersonal lives in his kingdom in terms of a wife versus a husband and their different beliefs, or how it affected their standing in the world in terms of their safety. Because if soldiers are not, if a soldier cannot follow you as a leader, what does that mean for your military? He didn't care about that. He just didn't. And it wasn't even like he wanted to institute it as an option, a new option, because he is ruler. No, he wanted to take everything away. And so, it's hard for me to believe that his motivation was in the right place for us to assume that what he believed was correct. Like having the wrong motivation, but getting it right. That's hard to believe in this circumstance, because it cost him and his country, literally, it cost them everything. And it was sort of like the beginning of the end. Don't get me wrong, there was other contributing factors to why ancient Egypt came to its knees, but this right here definitely played a big role in it. And the fact that he couldn't understand how important being on one accord when it comes to belief systems is to a nation just tells me that everything he did was from a personal standpoint and what he needed to prove to himself, which tells me it had everything to do with what went on in the royal court before he became Pharaoh. So, like I said, him just taking one of the forces of nature, which is the energy we receive from the sun, and telling people this is the only energy there, one, that is false. And it literally just came out of his head. As they say, he just pulled that out of his ass. Literally, that's what he did. And so we can't say, well, okay, this is monotheism because he decided to move beliefs from 1, 2, and 3 to 3. Like that's not monotheism. Okay, and honestly, what I see this as is animism, because he could have said, listen, everything comes from dirt. The dirt itself, it's what's alive that is making it where as though we have sustainability. And so if he told everyone, hey, worship the dirt, are we still saying this is monotheism because he's just saying worship the dirt? It's like, no, this is animism. Like he is not, this is not monotheism in that sense of the word. Now, I do know that there is some contention between true animism and what people think it is in terms of the worship of multiple quote-unquote deities versus one emanation of the all. I get that. However, what Akhenaten instituted in ancient Egypt was not monotheism. He did not come to a conclusion that worshiping multiple deities is a problem. Because if that was the case, we would see evidence of him demonstrating that these multiple deities have failed them, and he would prove through his position somehow that that wasn't the case. But what we know is that ancient Egypt practiced many types of arts, if you know what I mean, in terms of the sacred arts. And there was more than enough proof that whatever they were doing was working for them. So for him to come along and just want to change it, it's like, what are you changing it for? It's not because it's wrong. It's because you just don't personally like it. And why don't you personally like it? Because you've gotten some epiphany that, something is wrong? No, nothing is wrong. You're just bothered. And again, this is something that a tyrant would do, because a tyrant has something to prove. A tyrant doesn't care about how he or she destroys other people's lives. They just have something to prove, and it's usually rooted in self-esteem, mental issues, and things of that such. So, to go even further in terms of the monotheism of the monotheistic belief, or what have you, of the sun. Given that he was raised to know that, in a sense, in their pantheon, that the sun represented an energy that went to the underworld, and that they were blessed every time the sun came back up, and that there was this constant battle, right? That this is what the sun and darkness represent. For him to say to the people that this sun is all that we need, right? And it's the only thing that's in existence, and we should pray to this sun, because in some way, if we don't do this, we won't see the sun, and the sun will not bless us. If we put the pedal to the metal with that sort of thinking, that line of thinking, we would understand why there was instability in the region, because people can argue, well, the sun goes away every night. Are we not blessed because it went away? Is it going away because we're cursed? So it's like people could make the argument that the sun isn't the reason why the waters, come and go. That's the moon. So, why don't we include the moon? Like, you can make a lot of arguments based on the premise of what's been written about Akhenaten's stance on this. And you can see that this stance has nothing to do with understanding that there's only one entity flowing through all things. And this entity is coming directly from any one source. Like, to even say the source of all things is inside of one thing, and that one thing is hanging a couple miles away from us, that shows you that his mentality was not that of monotheism. Monotheism is the idea or the concept that all things have one causation. I mean, literally, like all things have one causation. It's not simply praying to one deity. It's not simply just believing that there is just one deity and then there's other things in existence outside of that deity. Because now, if you have your deity here and something else here, there's space in between. This space in between theoretically can be filled with another deity. It could prove that this doesn't even exist. So it's like, this is a problem for people to associate the term monotheism to Akhenaten. This is just my opinion. So no, Akhenaten is not someone that instituted one monotheism, because if he instituted monotheism, you would see more. You would see more written about his position on the Neteru and why he felt that the Neteru was not servicing the country, and thus the country would be better served by acknowledging that the sun is the only thing that needs prayer, literally needs prayer, because if they don't pray to the sun, that they will incur some sort of curse or non-blessing, whatever the case may be. But we don't see that. We just see him saying, hey, this is the new belief, this is what I'm doing, this is what you guys were doing, and if you don't like it, you can get down or get put down. That's kind of the idea that we get from his story. And when we get to, for instance, his son, who had to reinstate the religious order from before his father, we see why his son reinstated it, because he understood that if that what they were doing was not working and it wasn't real, then they wouldn't have had the blessings that they had. And so he was making his decision based on what was truly true for the region and the people. He might not have been completely into the whole religious idea of, well, what is a Neteru, what isn't a Neteru, what is what. He might not have been into that, but he understood what worked. And his position as a king was to make the best decision for the region, not necessarily for himself. And I think that growing up under a father who was a tyrant in that way, he understood through his own dealings with people and the royal court that when you have a king or a leader that does not care about the well-being of the people, he will make decisions that you will see manifest in such a way that will cause more problems than it solves. And so, as a ruler, his son probably had advisors that advised him about his grandfather and his great-great-grandparents and what he must be despite what his father has done. So, I can imagine there were people that was around Akhenaten that, made him feel comfortable in his ideas about religion. However, they were very cognizant that this was a problem. And he's the problem, but however, they have to deal with things accordingly because of the tradition and the politics that go along with it. So I just want to say that, we have to just stop taking information, especially when it comes to, history, at face value, and really, really look at this as if we're talking about real people. Because no one makes a decision based on nothing. Every decision is based on a history. And that history is rooted usually in someone's earlier life prior to that decision. So if we really want to be true to what we say in terms of understanding the truth of the matter, then we should do that. And I implore you guys to read up on his early life, to understand what the culture was at that time, so that you can get a better insight to, why he made the decision he made. And you might come up with something different. You can let me know in the comment section. But I think it's very important that we, look at the culture, the people, the royal house, different opinions around the circumstance at the time, so that we can come to a better conclusion than this guy is the founder of monotheism, despite the fact that he bears no similarity in his beliefs to monotheism. So I'm gonna let you guys go, but that is my thought, and you guys can get in the comment section and let me know. If I read a comment and I feel like maybe I should do a follow-up video to maybe, correct something I said, I definitely will. But until then, I will leave you guys with that, and I hope you guys have a interesting new year. Have a great one.